shall now continue the general debate. The Assembly will hear a statement by His Excellency William Ruto, Vice President of the Republic of Kenya. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming the Vice President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency William Ruto. I invite him to address the General Assembly.
On this 71st session of the United Nations General Assembly, I congratulate you, Mr. President, on your well-deserved election. 71 years after the founding of the United Nations, we have made significant progress in human development. Inspired by the guarantees in the Charter of the United Nations, people across the world, and Africa in particular, have achieved freedom and self-determination while expanding democracy. With advances in technology and collective action by the international community, the world has made remarkable strides in fields of healthcare, education, agriculture, and eliminated a number of killer diseases. The Cold War is now behind us, paving the way for greater opportunity for global synergy. Even amongst the youngest nations like Kenya, technological invention, such as the M-Pesa, are leapfrogging us into the future, promising greater prosperity and integration. Despite these remarkable strides, human progress is still constrained by a gamut of challenges: inequality within and between nations and regions, prosperity that does not translate into prosperity for all, poverty, violation of human rights, instability, and growing environmental fragility. These momentous challenges call for collective effort by the community of nations. Today, Africa's global trade stands at 3%. This primarily consists of crude oil, accounting for 50%, and the other percentage and processed minerals and agricultural raw materials. Meanwhile, Africa's population is projected to surpass that of India and China combined by the year 2050, unless the trade imbalance is reversed as a matter of urgency. This will accentuate vulnerability, enhance poverty, and risk of insecurity and instability for both Africa and the rest of the world. We need to reverse these trends and imbalances. Mr. President, the global community, cognizant of these challenges, has made important commitments by concluding agreements on the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Climate Change Agreement, the Addis Ababa Agreement on Agenda 2063. On our part, Kenya has continued to play an active part in leading international efforts. In the course of this year, we have hosted 3 important international conferences seeking sustainable solutions to global challenges. First, we hosted the United Nations Environmental Assembly in May this year to discuss current challenges to our global environment. Second, Kenya hosted the 14th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development in July this year. The conference focused on pressing issues related to global trade and economic development. Third, just last month, in August, alongside Japan, the Africa Union, UNDP, and the World Bank Group, we co-hosted in Nairobi the 6th Tokyo International Conference on Africa Development. The conference addressed specific concerns on how to speed up economic growth, investment and development in Africa in order to help eradicate poverty and promote shared prosperity. We forged good outcomes from all the 3 conferences, and I have no doubt that if implemented in full, each of the recommendations made would go a long way in transforming the world we live in. Mr. President, the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development during the 70th session ushered in a new era of international development cooperation and development. The Sustainable Development Goals reflect our ambition and hope for a better future for ourselves and for our children. We expect that the implementation of SDGs will result in transformed societies, improved environmental and climatic conditions, and global sustained economic growth. For this to happen, however, we also believe that we must eradicate poverty in our midst, and through building a fairer global trading system and a more equitable distribution of wealth within and between countries. It is our belief and expectation that international cooperation will remain at the core of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. We therefore note the importance of global partnerships, and in particular, the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. This partnership has a special role in accelerating delivery of development outcomes as effectively, fairly, efficiently as possible, with particular attention to the least developed countries. We therefore look forward to the second high-level meeting of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation that will take place in Nairobi, Kenya, later this year, and I extend a very warm welcome to all member states who will be attending. Mr. President, there are certain priorities that the government of Kenya attaches great importance to implementing our country's 2030 and the United Nations 2030 Agenda, as well as the Africa Union Agenda 2063. Among these priorities are issues of youth, women, and persons with disabilities. Like many governments in developing countries, the challenge of integrating youth and women in our societies and economies remain a daunting one. But the evidence for us is clear. If we do not succeed at mainstreaming gender and integrating youth in our vision, goals, and agendas, we shall fall miserably short of our ambition. This is why Kenya continues to remain focused on the priorities of youth, women, including building and financing special programs for their full integration and mainstreaming. In this regard, the remarkable achievements of the Global Fund in tackling malaria, HIV/AIDS, and tuberculosis are noteworthy. This is why the government of Kenya last week pledged $5 million towards the 5th Global Fund replenishment. Moreover, Mr. President, we have also pledged $500,000 for UNAIDS. And we also are acutely aware that the challenges we face in achieving our aspirations are not only political, economic, and social, they are also environmental and climatic. The conservation of wildlife and marine life, as well as the conservation and protection of our oceans and lakes and land ecosystems, including forests, trees outside forests matter considerably to our future, our food security, and economic prosperity. Essentially, our lives is tied to these matters, which is why we continue to pay great attention to the United Nations Convention on the Law of Seas and the United Nations Forest Instruments and to CITES. Mr. President, Kenya welcomes the ongoing preparation for the United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development Habitat 3. We look forward to the conference and subsequent adoption and implementation of the new urban agenda for the whole world. Kenya recognizes that the future of cities is fully integrated with the achievement of our Vision 2030 and the United Nations Vision 2030 agenda. We also believe that a stronger UN habitat is crucial to help guide the rapid urbanization we are witnessing across the globe. How the international community continues to support this organization and how we handle cities in the world will be integral to the success of Agenda 2030. Today, our world is confronted by large-scale instability and fragility, which is causing unprecedented human suffering and forced displacements. Furthermore, new security threats, including violent extremism, terrorism, and radicalization, threaten to roll back the gains we have made so far. In the Horn of Africa, these factors, together with ecological fragility and natural disasters in the face of scarce resources, have complicated the pursuit for development. Kenya welcomes the adoption of the New York Declaration for Refugees and the envisaged comprehensive refugee framework that will guide humanitarian response in a more humane, sensitive, timely, and compassionate manner. We also take note and applaud the Secretary General for convening the World Humanitarian Summit in May this year, which refocused the world's attention on the plight of refugees, migrants, and internally displaced persons. Kenya commits its availability to participate, as always, in discussions that will guide and give a firm way forward to this endeavor. For the last 2.5 decades, the region has been seized with the situation in Somalia. Throughout this time, Kenya has stood with Somalia, provided a safe haven for refugees, joined peacekeeping missions, and invested heavily in resources to combat Al-Shabaab and their affiliates. This solidarity has helped to substantially weaken the Al-Shabaab, liberate large swaths of land in Somalia, and provide space for the Somali government to begin the journey of rehabilitation and reconstruction. It is in this context that the government of Somalia has strongly expressed willingness to receive its citizens who are currently refugees, not just in Kenya, but in other parts of the world. On its part, Kenya has committed $10 million in this year to support the safe, orderly, voluntary, and dignified repatriation of more than 400,000 Somali refugees living in Kenya. Sadly, the efforts of the region and Somali's neighbors have not been matched by the commitment of the international community. Instead of supporting this regional effort, our partners, including the European Union, this year cut back on the support to AMISOM by 20%, when security experts were suggesting an increase in the budget for AMISOM that is providing ground troops to secure Somalia. Despite repeated appeals, the United Nations Security Council has failed to provide adequate, predictable funding as well as force multipliers for AMISOM. I once again implore members of the Security Council to take this matter seriously and align the mandate of AMISOM to the threat levels in Somalia, both on sea, on land, and in the air. In the case of repatriation, since the year 2012, the international community has pledged upwards of $500 million to support Somalia in its reconstruction and repatriation efforts. It is unfortunate, Mr. President, that less than 2% of that money has been realized. This failure of solidarity has placed a disproportionate burden on Somalia's neighbors and risks undermining the whole effort of dealing with refugees, helping Somalia reconstruct, and managing elements of terrorism and extreme radicalization that is going on. As Somalia moves, Mr. President, into the next phase of political transformation, the Somali Vision 2016 remains the best course of action for the country. However, the process of the post-2016 period will largely depend on how the current electoral system and process is managed. Somalia requires the full support and commitment of the international community in order to complete the process of political transition that will set the stage for a peaceful and prosperous Somalia. The road, Mr. President, to peace and security in South Sudan has been a long and difficult one. Sadly, recent events and developments threaten to plunge the country and indeed the entire region into a security and a humanitarian crisis. Kenya, as a guarantor of the 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement and the 2015 Agreement on the Resolution of Conflict, has been spearheading the search for sustainable peace, continues to invest significantly in efforts to build peace in South Sudan. I call upon the parties to the agreement on the resolution of conflict in the Republic of South Sudan to honor their commitment and work towards the full implementation of the agreement. This is the only basis for durable peace and reconciliation in that troubled country. The efforts of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, buttressed by the Africa Union Peace and Security Council, has been vital to these processes. The history of conflict resolution demonstrates that regional mechanisms are the best avenues towards sustainable outcomes. It is therefore imperative that the international community channels its efforts and support through IGAD. Mr. President, last year, here at the United Nations, Kenya made pledges during the Leaders' Summit on peacekeeping operations. I would like to confirm today that Kenya has indeed lived to every pledge it made. The first engineering capability troops training for African peacekeepers is ready and has been completed in Nairobi. This was done with the collaboration of our own Kenya Defense Forces and the United Nations, and with support from the good government of Japan and Switzerland. Kenya reaffirms its commitment to continue to provide training facilities for UN programs as part of its pledge to strengthen the United Nations peacekeeping operations. Kenya, as the current chair of the United Nations Peacebuilding Commission, has been at the forefront of advocating for a new peace-building architecture for sustainable peace throughout the world. This is why, Mr. President, later today, Kenya will co-host a pledging conference to boost the Secretary General's Peace Building Fund. For us, the message is clear. If we are ever to enjoy a peaceful world for all, we cannot invest any less in peace building than we do in peacekeeping. Today, in that pledging conference, the government of Kenya will be pledging $100,000 towards this peace building fund. While we build the peace-building architecture, we must also commit greater effort to rebuilding and transforming the United Nations system as a whole. We need to transform our global organization into a more effective and responsive entity that reflects the complex challenges and the realities of the 21st century. With regard to the United Nations Security Council, Kenya, as a member of the Committee of 10 Heads of State and the Governments of African Group on United Nations Security Council reform, is deeply concerned that progress towards addressing the historical injustice in the representation of African continent and its people on the Council remains not just slow, but unpromising. The 71st session must achieve greater and genuine progress in this matter. I take this opportunity to request you, Mr. President, to prioritize the appointment of the next chair of the Intergovernmental Negotiation on the United Nations Security Council reform and to preside over a year of real progress on this matter. It cannot be that in a world where democracy is the standard norm and accepted practice, that the single largest body in the world, the UN, can be playing by different rules. It cannot be that 1 or 2 or 5 individuals can hold ransom 7 billion people living in this world. It is accepted that democracy is the basic standard for any meaningful engagement in any part of the world, in any country, in any organization that is self-respecting. In the same light, we urge continued strengthening of the United Nations footprint across the world, in general and particularly the United Nations office in Nairobi. This will grow the relevance and enhance the legitimacy of the United Nations in the global south. Similarly, the 71st session must remain seized of the two-state solution as the best way out of the Palestinian-Israeli crisis. Kenya supports the vision of a two peaceful, prosperous, brotherly states living side by side. Finally, Mr. President, after 10 highly successful years, the time has come for us to bid farewell to Mr. Ban Ki-moon as the Secretary General of the United Nations. Mr. Ban has been a great steward of the international community, a humble and dedicated Secretary General to member states, a standard bearer of human rights, a champion of development and climate change, and a friend of not just Africa, but Kenya. On behalf of the government and the people of Kenya, I wish to extend our sincere gratitude to him for his friendship and his hard work. We wish him and his wife well in their future pursuits. As the international community now finally moves on to the last stage of selecting a new Secretary General, it is my fervent hope that the United Nations Security Council will exercise its responsibility in selecting a new Secretary General in a manner that will reflect our collective concerns for the development agenda, for world peace and cohesion, and for the key challenges that continue to face our collective enterprise of building a better world and a better future for all of us and for our children. I thank you.
On behalf of the